Throughout history, humans have looked up at the night sky and wondered if we are alone in the universe. Could there be extraterrestrial life out there? And if so, what would happen if they came to Earth and abducted us for experiments? In this video, we will delve into the strange and unsettling stories of 10 individuals who claim to have been abducted by aliens. Number 10. Antonio Vila Boas. From what must have been the red light district of the galaxy, an ominous red star illuminated the sky above the Brazilian farmer Antonio Vila Boas' house. Believing that it was a fallen and floating traffic light for airplanes, Boas went out to investigate. However, as he approached, the vermilion-hued object grabbed him. Once inside the craft, he was compelled to have intimacy with a red-haired alien, with whom he claimed to have fathered several children. The most puzzling aspect of Boas's story is that upon returning from his extraterrestrial encounter, Earth's doctors diagnosed him with radiation poisoning. Besides being the strangest STD I have ever heard of, it is difficult to envision a scenario in which a farmer would typically come across radioactive waste. Equally hard to understand is what the aliens' intentions were that night. Did they intend to land their craft in a field and simply mate with the first living creature that approached them? The world may never know. Number 9. Jessie Long. A supposed frequent flyer of some planet's Earthling Studies and Abductions Department, Jess Long claims aliens have been abducting him since childhood. According to Long, he and his brother were playing in the woods when they saw a round structure that paralyzed them before a tall, slender creature emerged. Apparently, the aliens have kept on returning for Long. On some notable occasions, he alleges they even took some of his seminal fluid and used it to create human-alien hybrid babies. What stands out as confusing about this case is, why did they need to extract seminal fluid from him multiple times? According to his account, the aliens used his seed to create a total of 9 kids. Yet a tablespoon of seminal fluid usually contains over 100,000 seminal fluid, meaning that they extracted far more than they needed. Unless the extra extractions were meant to make Long enjoy his abductions. I have a hard time believing that ETs would spend light years in transit to continue gratuitously milking one man. Number 8. Amy Rylance. In the early 1990s, a young woman named Amy Rylance from Australia claimed that she was abducted by a beam of light from an extraterrestrial spacecraft. Rylance and her friend Petra, who allegedly witnessed the event, reported that Amy was pulled through a window and taken aboard the spacecraft. There, she said, DNA samples were collected from her. While Rylance insisted that the procedures were not painful, she did note that they left marks on her body. One of the most baffling aspects of this case is that she was found 800 kilometers away from her home just 3 hours after her alleged abduction. As for physical evidence, it is quite limited. The only signs of the supposed spacecraft were a torn curtain and some burnt bushes, which Amy attributed to the beam that allegedly abducted her. This, of course, leads to the perplexing question: if the beam was powerful enough to burn bushes, how did it not harm her? Number 7. Travis Walton. On November 5, 1975, Travis Walton was riding in a truck through Apache-Sitgreaves National Forest with 6 coworkers when they saw a low-flying UFO hovering at a low altitude. Walton stopped the car and got out to investigate. As he approached the unknown craft, however, a powerful force overtook him and he blacked out, though his friends were frightened and drove away. When he woke up, he found himself in a Steven Seagal-style bra, exchanging punches and blows against a group of extraterrestrials. Walton stated he only stopped fighting after an unknown human wearing a black hat gassed him by putting a plastic mask over his face. The next thing he remembers is the UFO flying off into the night after dropping him along a lonely highway. Following his claim, he allegedly passed lie detector tests confirming the story, along with all but one of his co-workers. Still, skeptics are convinced this story is a hoax because of a number of discrepancies in the accounts of Walton and his workers. Even so, I don't understand how aliens seem to always understand how our system of borders works. It boggles my mind that people are always abducted and then left in a relatively convenient place, like a highway in their own country. You'd think that at least once the aliens would mess up and a person would land in another country. Number 6. Colonel H.G. Shaw. In 1896, Colonel H.G. Shaw became nationally known for his account of an unusual encounter during a buggy ride. According to Shaw, while near Stockton, he stumbled upon a metallic craft that had crashed. Soon after, 3 extraterrestrial beings that were 7 feet tall emerged from the vehicle, producing a warbling sound as they walked. The aliens attempted to carry Shaw into their craft, but they were unable to do so due to his weight. They eventually gave up and flew away in disappointment. While there were over 1,500 sightings of UFOs that year, investigations later revealed that most sightings were either planets, hoaxes, or practical jokes. Some people at the time even speculated that Thomas Edison was experimenting with new vehicles. However, it is more likely that the increase in mistaken accounts was due to a lack of public familiarity with blimps and balloons. Number 5. Barney and Betty Hill. Barney and Betty Hill were driving home one night after a road trip to the Niagara Falls when they saw a glowing orb skirting the face of the moon. At first, they assumed it was a shooting star, but quickly changed their minds when they saw it was moving upwards. So they decided to give chase to the orb in their 1957 Chevy Bel Air. Eventually, the chasers became the chase as the object closed in on them. It hovered over their car and enveloped them in a beam that made them feel a tingling sensation. Hours later, they found themselves 35 miles away, driving down the highway without the faintest of an idea as to how they'd arrived there. Over the next several weeks, the couple began having vivid dreams of being abducted, and they developed strange, idiosyncratic phobias. Most confounding of all was a pink powder found on one of Betty's dresses that chemical analysis was never able to identify. Of course, this is far from conclusive of anything, given that forensic technology in the 50s was still in its infancy. The powder's inability to be identified probably spoke more to the failings of the instruments identifying it than to an otherworldly nature. As for their development of strange phobias that could have been attributed to undetected spikes in their house's carbon monoxide levels, this odorless gas released by faulty stoves, grills, and other household appliances replaces oxygen in the air, which, when inhaled, can cause feelings of anxiety and fear at mid-range levels. Number 4. Peter Khoury. For some reason, when aliens abduct humans, they usually don't leave any forensic evidence behind, as if they're trying to avoid detection by some sort of intergalactic law enforcement. However, in the case of Peter Khoury, it appears they weren't as careful. In 1992, Khoury made headlines in Australia when he claimed that 2 alien females, one resembling a Scandinavian and the other an Asian, appeared in his bedroom and engaged in a threesome with him. After this unusual encounter, Khoury claimed he had proof in the form of a blonde hair he found. Subsequent DNA tests showed that the hair belonged to someone with a rare type of Chinese DNA, suggesting that while the encounter might have been outside his marriage, it wasn't extraterrestrial. Number 3. Frederick Valentich. Frederick Valentich was a flight student with ambitions of becoming a commercial pilot, but before he could take to the skies took him. While on a training flight in October of 1978, Valentich radioed into Melbourne Air Traffic Control asking about a craft that was approaching him from the east at 4,500 feet. ATC responded that there were no registered flights occupying that space, and that no vehicles were appearing on their radar screens. The craft continued to orbit above Valentich, and he reported that he felt it was toying with him. Moments later, he gave his final transmission in which he said he was experiencing engine troubles. When asked on what type of machine the aircraft above him was, he simply responded, "It's not an aircraft." The 4 sounds of metal crashing overtook his words. There are many explanations as to what may have happened to Valentich. One scenario is that he faked his disappearance. According to air traffic control records, his airplane never showed up on radar at the location where he claimed to be, and witnesses in a nearby town reported an unauthorized landing at around the time of his distress call. Why would he fake his death at the hands of, or tractor beam of a UFO? Despite the case's superficial appearance as a preemptive attempt to ruin human-alien relations, the answer is probably much simpler. After having failed all 5 components of his commercial aviation tests multiple times, he might have needed a way to falsely reincarnate and try again. Number 2. Carol and Helen Thomas. A mother and daughter from Britain, Carol and Helen Thomas, were walking to work when they saw a bright light coming from the alleys they were passing through. They heard a humming sound, but they continued walking without being afraid of the soundtrack. However, suddenly they felt sick and then woke up feeling confused and disoriented. Even though the walkway was completely dry, Helen's jacket was soaked in an unknown liquid. To their surprise, they were informed at work that they were hours late, but they had no recollection of what had happened during that time. For months after the incident, both women experienced unexplained pain, blisters, fever, and anxiety. During hypnosis, they both gave similar accounts of being examined by white creatures with wet skin. However, some might think that recalling similar events under hypnosis indicates a shared experience, but it could also suggest that the hypnotist suggested the same narrative to both. Therefore, it induced a false memory in the women that showed them being abducted by aliens rather than being tricked by hypnotizing snake oil salesmen. Number 1. Betty Andreaason Lucas. While at her home in Massachusetts, Betty Lucas experienced an overwhelming force that enveloped her and her family. As her family watched in stunned silence, she was lifted through a window and taken onto a spacecraft. On board, an unknown device was implanted in her head, and she was informed that she would eventually receive a cosmic revelation. Throughout the experience, she felt calm, despite the unusual situation. Betty also noted that her abductors wore boots and seemed to float, raising the question, why wear footwear if they don't touch the ground? However, there are some inconsistencies in her story that raise doubts. In 2007, her son disclosed that at the time of her revelations, she was undergoing severe psychological turmoil due to the recent loss of her 2 sons. He also accused her of fabricating the story to exploit the UFO community for financial gain. What do you think about these stories? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and thanks for watching.